And what I'd like to have the privilege of talking to you today about is cyberbullying and thinking about what educators can do about it. So recently we've conducted some studies with Canadian adults, and we found that 90% of adults are concerned about cyberbullying. It actually has a higher level of concern among Canadian adults than does the worry that their children will have early sex or get pregnant or use drugs. And so this new worry has really focused on how much time that children and youth spend online. And interestingly enough, it's not my generation, it's your generation that's worried about how much time that children spend online. And the major worry about it is that if we spend time online, we're going to become antisocial. Well, here's a picture that none of you will remember because it happened before you were born, about how antisocial we were before people could go online while we were riding the subway. So even though we're concerned about it, I want to talk to you today and have you start to think about that technology is here to stay. It's a part of our daily lives. And it absolutely affects the way that we interact with one another and the way that we communicate with one another. And let me just give you an example. In 2018, this is what happens in an internet minute, and this shocked me. In one internet minute, there will be 4.3 million videos viewed on YouTube. In one internet minute, there will be 2.4 million Snapchats that will be created. In one internet minute, 174,000 people will be scrolling through Instagram. Are any of you doing it now? Just checking. There will be, in one internet minute, there will be 38 million text messages sent. So technology is here to stay. It's part of our lives. In many ways, there's a huge benefit to technology. You're using it probably in your classroom. Youth are using it to seek connection. It protects vulnerable youth like LGBTQ youth. They find communities online. It's a positive experience. We use it to look up information and educational reasons. We use it to find out how to cope with something or how to do something. We use it for entertainment. So there are many benefits, but there are some risks with going online. And one of those risks is about cyberbullying. So today I'm going to talk to you about three things. First of all, I'm going to spend a little time talking about what is cyberbullying. Then I'm going to talk about why do you need to worry about it as educators? Why even think about it? Is that something that doesn't happen in the classroom, or does it? Why do I need to be concerned about it? And then I'm going to leave you with strategies. What can you as an educator do to make a difference to prevent cyberbullying from happening in the first place, or to intervene and address it when it does occur? So let's start with what is cyberbullying? Well, if we look at the researchers and our academic information, research, what do we say it is? Well, we say that cyberbullying is the use of information and communication technology to cause harm or hurt another person. There are three aspects to cyberbullying that are the same as what I call offline bullying. Online and offline bullying are actually characterized by the same characteristics. One, there's a power imbalance. That is that the person who's perpetrating the aggression or the bullying has more power than the individual who's being victimized. The second aspect is this notion that it's a targeted individual. It's not random. I specifically go after a specific person, and I go after that person with an intention, and that's the third characteristic, with an intention to harm. So cyberbullying is the same as online bullying. It has the same characteristics, only it's happening in the online or using information technology. The problem is that most of your students won't call it cyberbullying. Some researchers, like myself, have even called it electronic bullying. They won't call it that either. What you might hear when students are talking about it is drama as a definition of it, and trash talk. So one of the key reasons why you understand what it is you have to unpack what students are experiencing. So you have to, when they're reporting trash talk or drama to you, you have to find out, was there a power imbalance? Was someone targeted, and was there an intention to harm? I'm worried about cyberbullying because it has greater effects over and above offline bullying. And why is that? It has to do likely with the nature of the online environment. What happens on the online environment? Well, think about it. When you go online, you no longer have the face-to-face contact. So you don't have the body cues and the nonverbal cues. All you have is that text. And how many of us have read that text and misinterpreted the text or misattributed some negative intent to that text that wasn't meant to be there? And so we don't have the context to put around it. We don't have the cues. We don't have the social cues that help us understand it. We also tend to be more rapid in our response online than offline. So we're more impulsive in what we do. So we don't have the information that we may need to make good decisions about what the intention or what the real motive is behind. And we also are more likely to misinterpret it or respond faster. And so the problem with the online environment is that we are more impulsive in our responses and we're more disinhibited in our responses. So that might create an environment where we're more likely to engage in cyberbullying than we wouldn't do that when we were offline. There are also features of the cyber world, as I call it, that make the impact or contribute to the impact of cyberbullying being more severe and more significant. The first is that it's more permanent. As much as we can tell youth, and especially adolescents, once you put it out there, it's always out there. There are horrible pictures from me from my early graduate days that are still online. Oh, okay, that's a lie. They're actually horrible pictures from my early professor days. The second thing is that it's 24/7. So on offline bullying, we can leave the school, we can leave the classroom, we can leave the community activity and be safe at home. Not true in online bullying. It's always there, it's always accessible, and we actually find there's research that shows that kids who are victimized are most likely to access their phones in the middle of the night. They perseverate, they go back and back and back to that text. And what is that doing? That's re-traumatizing them every time. It's like going in and re-experiencing the bullying interaction every time. The other thing that makes the impact so significant is that there's an unlimited audience. That it can go out quickly, it can go out to many people, and part of the youth's experience who have been victimized is they don't know who it's gone to. So they live in this fear that everybody they've talked to might have seen the text or might have seen the picture, and so it creates even more heightened anxiety. And then the last piece is this perception of anonymity. They don't know who did it, they don't know who's seen it, and so that makes the impact even more. Those features are unique to cyberbullying. And that's why the impact of cyberbullying is greater than face-to-face. So how big a problem is it? Well, we asked kids in a national survey, and we found that 38% of boys reported that they had been cyberbullied at least once, and 45% of Canadian girls had reported that they had been cyber-victimized at least once. That number increases with age. So as students get older, a higher percentage of students are likely to report cyber. So let's take these together. So we know that it happens frequently. We know that there are unique features that impact the negative effects that are associated with it. But what are some of those negative effects? Well, some of those negative effects include, if you've experienced cyber victimization, you're at a much higher risk for reporting symptoms of anxiety, symptoms of depression, and what we call post-traumatic stress disorder. And those symptoms are greater than you would experience if you had just experienced face-to-face, and you're more likely to see them 1 to 2 to 3 years out. And so there's a long-term effect. You're more likely to report that you use substance use, and often the youth who are cyber victimized report using substance use to cope or sort of mitigate the negative experiences that they're having about it. You tend to avoid school and have more school absenteeism. So as a teacher, that's a red flag for you. If students are missing schools regularly or reluctant to go to school, then you need to start talking to them about what are their social experiences like. And for a small minority of those who are cyber victimized, they also become aggressive online. So some of them engage in aggressive behavior and conduct and perpetrate the cyberbullying themselves. We also need to be concerned about those who are perpetrating the cyber bullying. And interestingly, there's an overlap in symptoms. So those who are perpetrating the cyberbullying also report poor performance, also tend to avoid school. They also tend to be highly aggressive in your classroom, so you could identify who they are. They also tend to break a lot of rules, and that also you can see in a long-term consequences as well as in the moment when they're engaging in that behavior. So at the end of the day, what we've come to understand is that there are negative effects associated with cyberbullying. And lots of researchers have looked at different things about what explains those effects. But one of the things that we've looked at in our program is how experiencing cyberbullying affects the brain. And we actually see that cyberbullying, kids, when we're looking at when they experience cyberbullying, we've looked at them in the MRI machine, and we actually see the same areas of the brain light up as the same who's experienced child abuse. So they experience the social pain of cyber abuse in the same way at a brain level of those that experience child abuse. Here's a really important, I think, quote that captures what children's experiences are. It's like 1,000 paper cuts just eating away at your soul. And that's likely related to the repetitive nature, that they can go back and see it over and over and over again. In other words, they're re-traumatized over and over and over again. So what are some of the school risk factors? What are things that you would see in your environment that you could create that might, or realize that are risk factors? Well, one of the things that often surprises people is that the risk for all the risk factors associated with offline bullying are similar to all the risk factors that are associated for those who are bullied online, for those who experience cyberbullying. So in other words, there's a huge overlap. So in our Canadian research, we find about a 90% overlap between those who are cyber victimized offline and those who are cyber victimized online. So you as an educator know the social dynamics of your classroom. You know likely who's at risk for experiencing that cyberbullying. So you can identify them and intervene. And we're going to come back to that. There are many protective factors, things that protect individuals from being victimized that are related to school. So things that you as educators can make a difference on, things that you can do to protect children from being victimized. The first one is about peer support. The more peer support that individuals have, the less likely they are to be victimized. And so you can build the relationships in your classroom to protect individuals from that risk of being victimized. The second one is related to classroom management. Classroom management, classrooms that have equity, that are collaborative, that engage, where children feel safe, where children feel like they can go to a teacher if they have a problem, are less likely to have high rates of victimization. So by managing a class well, you can reduce the rates of victimization. Schools that children report feeling safe, schools that children report have rules that are regularly and consistently reinforced, are less likely to have higher rates of victimization. So by creating school rules, and you can create safety and increase a positive climate. Having policies related, where policies explicitly talk about cyberbullying, policies that explicitly talk about bullying, policies that explicitly talk about healthy and unhealthy relationships are much less likely to have high rates of victimization. So you want to have explicit policies. Staff education, professional development. The more you educate your staff about cyberbullying, the more you educate your staff about bullying in general, the lower the rates of cyber victimization. So you can develop these and work on these school risk and protective factors. Then they're related to having reduced rates of bullying and victimization online. But you as educators can make a difference. And that's what I really want to talk to you about today. There are several things that make you in a unique position to address cyberbullying. First, you understand the social relationships in your classroom. You understand who might be marginalized. You'll probably recognize who's included, who has power. By being in that key position, you are the social leader in your classroom. You have knowledge about the social relationships. Through knowing the social relationships, you can prevent cyber victimization. You can engage in social architecture to make sure that every child is included. The second is that in many provinces, you as educators are actually mandated to address cyber victimization and cyberbullying. So there's legislation so that even though bullying online may not happen at school, or it may happen off school grounds, schools are still responsible for addressing it when it happens. So you as educators are in a unique position where you have to address on and offline bullying. And you can do that because you know the social dynamics. The third is that we know that cyberbullying impacts how children get along in classrooms. Cyberbullying impacts the relationships among the children in the classroom. So even though it's not happening on the school grounds sometimes, it's still going to change their dynamics, and it's also going to impact negatively your school climate. So you as educators really need to address it, and by addressing it, you can make a difference with it and in it, and you can reduce it. And we know that if you're provided with the appropriate resources, you can be successful in reducing the prevalence of cyber victimization and cyberbullying. So far we've talked about what is cyberbullying, why worry about it, and now I want to come to why should you do something about it? Why are educators so important? Well, educators are really important in addressing it because they understand the dynamics of the classroom. They understand the social relationships of the classroom. The other reason is in many provinces, don't move when you talk is the lesson. In many provinces, there's legislation about that educators are mandated to address cyberbullying. So even though it doesn't always happen on the school grounds, that educators must address it, and they have a responsibility to address it. The other reason is that educators, as social leaders of the classroom, have an opportunity to role model and change and address the social relationships and create an inclusive school climate, as we've just heard. So educators are in a really important position where they can address cyberbullying, and we know when they're provided with the appropriate resources, they're effective in doing it. The problem is that educators don't always know about it, that most children who are cyberbullied don't tell adults. They don't tell the adults, their parents, they don't tell adults, the teachers. They do tell frequently the peers, probably because the peers might see it and might know about it, but they feel more likely to tell their peers. And that's a problem because one of the characteristics, what did I say? The first characteristic about bullying is a power imbalance. And we need adults to step in and right that power imbalance. The second is that peers don't have the skills or the knowledge about how to address it. You have those skills and those knowledges through your professional education and know how to address it. The barriers, we have to start to address the barriers about why they don't report it. They don't want to make a big deal. They don't feel like we as educators can handle it or know how to address it because the research shows that kids learn new technology faster than adults do, and so they don't see us as being very effective. We have to show them that we're effective by addressing it, starting with the small things. They fear if they tell, it will get worse. So when you deal with it, you want to make sure you use an evidence-based strategy to make sure the problem doesn't get worse. And they also, even if they tell about it, adults often dismiss it. And so we have to stop and listen. And I mean really listen to what students' experiences are in the classroom. And when we really listen, we're effective in the after disclosure. Because if we don't really listen, students are more traumatized. They report having higher levels of traumatization. If they don't feel the educator listened to them or the adult listened to them, they have higher levels of traumatization if they feel like they've been blamed. So our job is to really listen and not blame them and be non-judgmental and also be realistic in what we can do. It's going to take time. Bullying is a behavior that builds up over time. It's about a relationship problem, and it's going to take time to address that relationship problem. So we have to be realistic when we do it. And the best thing that we can do is create the environment that enables them to tell through having that healthy relationship. The title of this talk was Cyberbullying, There's No App for That, because it's about relationships. So what can you do as an educator in the classroom? What are specific things and strategies that you can do that's going to make a difference? Well, first one is help children and youth build the healthy relationship skills that they need. The problem isn't just about being online and what happens online. It's about having the relationship skills. It's about having the communication skills to address conflict. It's about having the self-regulation skills to calm ourselves down, to regulate those intense emotions when I first read that text that might set me off. It's about having the ability to slow down, think about my response, and take it. It's about having problem-solving skills when I receive that text that I don't like. How am I going to address this problem? So teaching the social emotional learning skills is going to help prevent cyberbullying in your classroom. The second thing that you can do is focus on digital literacy skills. Help them understand and unpack what goes on. Use recent news events. We've just had many in the news about a song. Was it appropriate? Was it inappropriate to hear that song? Break that song down. Talk about what that song means. Talk about what that news event means to build your digital literacy skills, and think about how you can advocate for positive relationships online. The third one is to facilitate classroom relationships. Be aware of the groupings of your classroom. Children who are cyberbullied are more likely to not belong to a group, are more likely to be isolated into the classroom, and are more likely not to report having a best friend. Do each of the students, ask yourself, reflect, have someone in the classroom that they can go to? Do they have a caring connection of a peer? Because that's one important way that we can prevent cyberbullying. The third is know what it is. Know that definition. Know how youth interpret it. Talk to them. Ask them, what does cyberbullying mean to them? How do they identify it? How do they define it? And how could you recognize it when it happened? Be informed, be educated so that you can recognize it, identify it, and call it out when you see it and when it's happening. The other piece that we have to do is, as educators, we have to teach students about the negative impacts of it. What happens when a youth is victimized? What happens when someone perpetuates the aggression and is aggressive to others, perpetrates that aggression? We need to educate students about the negative effects so that we can stop them from doing it and help build that empathy and that understanding so that if they do see it, they also might be a bystander, someone who stands up and supports others and actively defends others and what they do. The other is intervene and refer. The effects of cyberbullying can be devastating, and sometimes it requires other help and partnerships. So what does your school policy say? Who do you need to be in contact with? In Ontario, you have to be in contact with the parents, and you have to be in contact with the administration. You may need help from the school board to address getting the image down or getting it off the web. You may need to call in the mental health team to support that youth. Identify who you need, intervene and refer, and get the supports for you and for the child to make sure your student has the support that they need. So at the end of the day, there's a couple of messages that I hope that you take home from this presentation. First of all, cyberbullying is a significant problem. You're going to see the effects of it. You're going to see the groupings that might be related to kids who are vulnerable to being cyberbullied in your classroom. You can make a difference about it. So you have a significant role to play. Third, I hope you learn some strategies that you can engage in to support those children in your classroom to, one, prevent it from happening in the first place, but two, to intervene when it does happen and make a difference. And three, I hope what you've learned today is, yes, there are risky things online, but maybe you'll go away and learn, how can I also create a world where the use of technology is beneficial, and how can I maximize those beneficial effects and prevent the negative ones? Thank you.